Hello, listeners and viewers. I'm going to share with you a special episode of Keep Canada Weird. Now, typically, Keep Canada Weird provides a weekly roundup of all the unique and offbeat news stories that played out across Canada over the past week. But in this episode, we're going to do something a little different. Instead of sorting through the strange headlines, we fire up the VCR and hit play on a movie that might just be one of the most eerily prophetic pieces of Canadian flavored comedy ever committed to film. We're talking about the 1995 comedy Canadian Bacon. Written and directed by documentary legend Michael Moore, Canadian Bacon imagines a world where the US president manufactures a conflict with Canada as a way to boost the American economy and to boost the president's approval ratings. It features the late great John Candy. Dan Aykroyd makes a cameo. It has a whole bunch of Canadian stereotypes and more dad jokes than I even care to remember. But that's not the weirdest part. Almost 30 years later, Canadian Bacon feels more relevant than it ever did. The similarities between some of the elements in this film and the present-day American-Canadian conflict are striking. But you're going to hear all about it soon. In this episode, my Keep Canada Weird partner Aaron and I are going to take a deep dive into this cult classic. We'll unpack the jokes, explore the political commentary, and ask the big question. Did the 1995 comedy film Canadian Bacon predict the American-Canadian conflict of 2025? So grab your popcorn and let's get into it. In this episode, we're going to the movies.
You are listening to Keep Canada Weird, a weekly weird news roundup by the Nighttime Podcast.
Handsome Aaron Airport. Something we wanted to do is dissect, review, analyze Canadian movies. And oddly, as it turned out, we have a bit of a theme, and they always involve food, I guess, because we've released an episode called Keep Canada Weird Eats the Last Timbit, which was our Tim Hortons The Last Timbit review. And I think we're about to eat some Canadian bacon.
Yeah, I guess my one question off the top here, though, is this technically a Canadian movie?
Well, it was shot a lot in Toronto.
Yeah.
You see Niagara Falls, which I know is, borders Canada, the US, that whole thing.
Yeah, it definitely has a strong Canadian theme connection, shot in multiple locations in Canada.
Stars John Candy, and Dan Aykroyd has an uncredited cameo in it.
He has a cameo, yeah, uncredited.
The
Yeah.
RCMP are all through it, and all just like Canadian tropes and stereotypes are like plot devices and plot elements throughout this whole movie. Yes, it is a Canadian movie, and it is a flop.
Well, I think technically it's not Canadian because I think it's, in terms of who produced it and all of that. I wouldn't say that it would fall under technically a Canadian movie, but I think it's close enough for us to sink our teeth into it.
Let's talk about some high-level aspects of this film. It was released in September of 1995. Although it was filmed like 2 years earlier, it was filmed in 93, and it went through a bit of like developmental hell. Like after it was filmed, there was some, ownership of companies moved around a few times. And by the time it was released, it ended up only getting a limited release, and largely it was a straight to video. Like most people who would have seen Canadian Bacon would have seen it straight to video.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting note, it was directed by Michael Moore, his only narrative style film. And Michael Moore is famous for a variety of documentary films. You want to name a few? Because I know you know them.
Oh, well, obviously Bowling for Columbine is probably his biggest.
Yeah, and that was awesome.
Yeah, Roger and Me. He did Roger and Me, right? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right. He did Fahrenheit 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Fahrenheit 9/11. So he didn't just direct it, he wrote it as well. He's the complete creative force behind this film.
Okay. And I think that shines through.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. I have a lot of negative to say about Michael Moore's role in this film.
Okay, I have a lot of positive to say. This could be interesting then.
This is going to be very interesting. Okay.
As I was watching it, like Michael Moore in Fahrenheit 9/11 and Bowling for Columbine and Sicko was another big documentary he did. It's like his style of humor is this kind of like highbrow humor, but it's also like lowbrow, like a dad joke sort of. It's like kind of like social commentary told in like a dad joke style. Actually, there's a review of this movie I'll read to you here. It's just very short, but I think this nails it. After generating solid laughs during its first hour, Canadian Bacon falls apart in its third act. The film was perceived as too lowbrow for the highbrow and too highbrow for the lowbrows. Do you think
So
that's right?
I disagree with this because I think it falls apart way earlier than than what this reviewer is indicating.
Okay.
Uh, Here's my issue with Michael Moore's humor pertaining to this exact film.
Okay.
So in his documentaries, Michael Moore's humor comes in and out. So there's times where, and I think all of his documentaries are covering very serious issues.
Hmm.
And then there are times where his documentaries will have a little fun with the topic, will, sprinkle some humor here and there. And so I think his style of humor in small doses works really well in the realm of documentaries. In a purely, full-length feature film that is from start to finish Michael Moore's humor, I think that's where this film falls apart
Okay.
completely because there's a few times like, earlier in the film where I was like, oh, that was pretty funny or that was a good line. But for the most part, I was just rolling my eyes through this
Hmm.
film where I was like, I can't take any more Michael Moore jokes. A lot of comedies will get like punch up writers in or something where
Hmm.
they'll come in and they'll take something you wrote and they'll add a little sprinkle to it. They'll make it a little funnier. They'll suggest some things. My God, this film needed some
It needed
rewrites in
it.
terms of the comedy. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
I get that. There was a few moments where I did chuckle or laugh out loud, and that doesn't always happen with me. I'm not a fan of comedy specifically, but this had its moments. We'll get to the plot. Let's get through a few more of the overarching or some high. Let's get through a bit more high level stuff. We have to mention the movie stars John Candy, huge famous actor. This is his last movie ever released, which is pretty sad.
Did this though come out after what was it, Wagons East? I think
Wagons
that he
East.
did. That was the last. That was the film that he died in the middle of making. Was Wagons East?
What happened is he filmed this movie in 93, this movie being Canadian Bacon. Shortly after, he filmed Wagons East. He died during the creation of the movie Wagons East. In fact, Richard Lewis from Curb Your Enthusiasm, his co-star on Wagons East, was
Hmm.
the one who found John Candy dead in his like trailer or whatever.
Right. Right.
But what ended up happening was Wagons East was released before this movie. So
Before. Okay.
yeah, so
Yeah.
this was his last motion picture released, although he had filmed one after it was just released prior. So it's kind of complicated.
Right. Right.
And
It's a little
I
complicated.
mentioned at the beginning there was a bit of developmental hell, like it went through some stuff while Canadian Bacon was going through some stuff. He filmed and released another movie. So he released two movies were released posthumously, like after his death.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. What's your favorite John Candy movie, do you think?
Probably Uncle Buck,
Hmm.
only slightly ahead of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah, yeah, those are the two solid ones.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw Spaceballs in there, although it's
Oh,
not. I don't know if you
yeah.
call it a John Candy movie, but he has such a great role in it
It's a
that
John
I
Candy
think my
movie.
favorite John Candy performance is from Spaceballs.
Yeah, I wouldn't even consider that when I was saying, but Uncle Buck is such a classic movie though.
Uncle
Yeah.
Buck is probably the best like John Candy vehicle.
Mhm.
That's the movie. The movie is totally built around him and it's a great movie. It's hilarious.
Iconic.
Yeah, it's a great concept. And I would say that's probably the best John Candy movie, but his
Mhm.
favorite performance, my favorite performance of his
It's in
is
Spaceballs.
Spaceballs.
So John Candy, huge part in Canadian Bacon. A lot of other names though. Alan Alda, who plays the president of the United States. He's from the TV show MASH. We had the girl from Cheers, Rhea, I think is her name.
Rhea Perlman.
Yeah, she plays kind of John Candy, who is a sheriff from Niagara Falls, New York. She plays his girlfriend slash coworker.
Yes, right. Yeah, he's in love with her and whatever else they
Mhm.
have going on.
Yeah. I mentioned that this movie was largely a flop. Budget, $11 million. Didn't even bring in 200,000.
I want to talk about the budget for a second here.
Okay.
So my general thought on the budget is I would say 99% of the budget went to the actors, I would say. Look at the scenes in Toronto. There were literally no extras. Like, even when you look at whenever the president would like show, especially like early when the president showed up, they had the bare minimum amount of actors around the
Mm-hmm.
president, where normally a president shows up and there's a ton of Secret Service, there's a ton of just bodies everywhere protecting the president. And there was maybe four people with him, and he's just casually strolling into the
Mm-hmm.
building.
Yeah, and they're like the other main. Yeah, they're like the other main characters, like his security chief.
They're the other main characters, so that there were a lot of scenes that could have really used more crowds and more background actors, and they definitely chopped a lot of that intentionally because I think they had a certain budget. They had a great cast. Like they had some big names in this movie. So to me, it seems like they blew the budget on the performers. And this movie needed these performances, I felt, because the script was so weak. I found the script so just empty. And the humor was at times was okay, but through most of it I thought was very weak. That the actors really had to carry this film on their shoulders.
Okay, well, let's get through the plot. You want to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's give a spoiler alert, though. Anyone who hasn't seen Canadian Bacon, if you've gotten this far in the episode and you plan to watch the film, hit pause and go watch the film because we're going to go through the plot, spoilers and all. Let's get into it.
Have you seen the polls? You know, it's not fair. I mean, every other president had all of the Russians to blame for everything. What have I got?
For an unpopular president,
The voters felt that your being alive or dead had no real bearing on their daily lives.
it's time to give war a chance.
Dead.
What are we going to do for an enemy now?
A riot between Americans and Canadians broke out last night.
Now, with a little inspiration,
All I said was Canadian beer sucked.
Give me 1 week and I'll have Americans burning maple leaves.
they'll create a cause worth fighting for.
Is Canadian Prime Minister Clark MacDonald a member of a satanic cult?
Oh, that is stunning.
Canadians are always dreaming up ways to ruin our lives. The metric system, for the love of John.
Captain Kirk of the USS Enterprise. Canadian.
Do not panic. I'm in complete control.
Welcome to Canada.
I'm your worst nightmare.
I don't know what you're talking about.
We got ways of making you pronounce the letter O.
What we have here is a brave but misguided group of Americans who've gone right into Canada and kicked some serious Canadian butt.
Oh, Americans! Welcome to Ontario. Sportsman's paradise.
Isn't it, though?
John Candy,
There's a time to think, and there's a time to act. And this, gentlemen, is no time to think.
Alan Alda,
Surrender pronto, or we'll level Toronto.
Rhea Perlman,
I'm in Canuck Central.
Kevin Pollak,
And when have you ever heard anyone say, honey, let's stay in and order some Canadian food?
and Rip Torn.
I can't kill America's neighbors.
I can.
From Michael Moore, director of Roger and Me,
I think it's time we put the America back in North America.
Canadian Bacon. The invasion is coming.
I gotta go. Didn't I tell you to go before the invasion?
So much of this movie mirrors 2025 Canadian-American relations. I'm shocked that people aren't talking about this because there were so many points in watching the movie where I thought like, oh my God, Michael Moore like predicted the American-Canadian conflict.
Yeah, it lines up in a lot of ways. The motives are different as to why America wants to kind of stage a conflict with Canada. But there was even one line where one of the, presidents, I don't think they say his official title, but he was talking to like a intelligence officer who even referred to Canada as basically the 51st state.
Of us to have been so blind for so long. But we thought, oh, they're just Canadians. Yeah, they're practically the 51st state. We admired them. Clean streets, no crime, no minorities. How'd they do that?
Yeah, that my ears perked up when I heard them say that. And right from the very beginning scene of the movie, there's the connection because the opening song is God Bless America Again. And the lyrics of the song outline this kind of like vague dissatisfaction with America. And it used to be great, or God blessed it in the past in this vague way that I can't quite put my finger on. But it's not the same anymore, and we need God to bless America again.
God bless America again. You must know the trouble that she's in.
Of the beginning of the movie. And, you know, the God Bless America Again, Make America Great Again. You have to see the connection there.
Yeah, there's definitely, again, an unintentional connection because this is 1995 or 1993 when it was made. And yeah, there was a number of times in the film where I was like, oh, wow, that is interesting.
Yeah. So we hear this long song, God Bless America Again. And then we get to a scene where there's a plant, it's a weapons manufacturing plant in Niagara Falls, New York, that recently went out of business, and it's laying off all of its staff. So everyone in the town is sad and depressed. John Candy's character, who is the sheriff, Bud Boomer is his name. Bud Boomer and his sidekick, played by Rhea Perlman, who used to be in Cheers, since they lost their job at the weapon manufacturing plant called Decker's Industries or something, they've taken a job which is basically fishing bodies out of the Niagara Falls of people who've ended their own lives. Is where the movie starts. So it's a little dark. I didn't find those scenes very funny. I didn't laugh. I was kind of like, this is a weird way to start it.
No, it was kind of funny when they said people would get $25 for preventing them from jumping, but $50 for retrieving their bodies at the bottom.
Meanwhile, in other news, due to the record number of laid-off workers jumping to their death in Niagara Falls, the city council has just approved an incentive program. Sheriff's deputies who actually managed to talk someone out of jumping will be getting $25. If they have to go and retrieve the body, they'll be getting $50.
Jump! Jump! Jump!
But that all ends pretty quick because they have to go to what starts as almost a yard sale where they're selling off the ammunition and the weapons from the plant that recently shut down. First, it's like an auction and everyone's buying the machine guns and the bazookas and all this stuff.
So next, what do I hear for this beautiful wire-guided, uranium-tipped, fire and forget thing? And what do you want to say in that? Who's $1,000 start? $1,500 then. At $500, anyone?
But then the owner of the business, Mr. Decker, comes and takes over, and he takes over the microphone, and he explains to all the workers who recently lost their jobs that it is not his fault that he had to shut the plant down. It is the fault of the government because the government isn't investing in defense and war, and as a result of that, everybody had to lose their jobs.
We didn't know who to mistrust, but we had to defend ourselves. And you had good jobs to put meat on the table. But today we find ourselves being destroyed, not by the Reds, but by a bunch of short-sighted, bleeding heart, penny-pinching Washington wimps.
And from there comes the president. The president makes an appearance, I guess, to support everyone who lost their jobs. We kind of get like all the main characters just thrown into this scene.
Yeah, yeah, and it is the biggest scene in the movie, probably. There's
the most people.
There's the most people, and there's the most kind of activity going on, because so many of the scenes are shot very much kind of in one little small place with only a handful of characters. There's not a lot of scenes where there's a lot of people at the same time.
Yeah. Well, they're all there. The president gives his little speech and telling everyone, you know, how great peace is versus wartime. But what ends up happening is somebody accidentally launches a missile from a bazooka looking thing or a RPG kind of gun, launches it towards the president, and John Candy's character, Sheriff Boomer, dives and saves the president from getting what a lot of people thought was an assassination attempt.
The answer, my friend. Okay, I'm in command here. Stay calm. Get off me.
What's going on? The sheriff has the eagle covered.
Oh, it's an honor to meet you, sir. You know, I'm sorry I didn't vote for you in the last election, but I had to stay home. You see, the cable company said the installers were coming between the hours of... Pardon? Get off me. Oh, I'm sorry, sure.
Oh. Which, again, this is something that mirrors present day, because the president in this movie, in Canadian Bacon, the economy's terrible. His ratings are down. And people are losing their jobs. But his assassination attempt gives him a big boost in the ratings. And a lot of people think Donald Trump won the election as a result of that assassination attempt. So that's just something that kind of I saw as a connection between this movie and present day news.
Yeah, that is a good connection. I didn't really pick up on that one, but that's a good point to make about that. It's it's definitely another one of those circumstances where, wow, this is an interesting, Nostradamus type look into the future.
It's weird. And this is kind of what kicks off the main plot of the movie. What happens is after this this incident with the plant closing down, the approval ratings are low. Although the president did get a bump on approval ratings by surviving the assassination attempt. When people realized he wasn't hurt at all, I guess that bump in approval ratings started to drop again. So he started needed to come up with some other way to get people supporting him so he could win, the next election or whatever. All of his advisors or the people in his ear are saying, we need some kind of conflict, something to distract people from the problem, something to get to get business booming again, get weapons created again, put fear back in people's hearts.
Rumors that you were clinically dead for 5 minutes and returned to life boosted your rating with the religious right.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, there's also something in there. The voters felt that your being alive or dead had no real bearing on their daily lives.
Well, you could take that a couple of ways,
With all due respect, sir, enjoy your single term.
It's not fair. I mean, every other president had all of the Russians to blame for everything. What have I got?
Mr. President, it is really too bad that the Russians are no longer in the game.
Hell, they weren't much fun anyway. Never got to kill a single one of them.
Yes, General, but without them, you and your friends would have had to get real jobs.
That isn't funny, Stu.
Stu's got a point.
Yeah, they have this summit with the Russian president at the time. And they bring him over and basically are begging him to get back into the throes of their former Cold War conflict. And the Russians are just basically like, no, you beat us. That's it.
It's done. Yeah. The Russian president in the movie, his name was Vlad and Vladimir. Was Putin president back in 93?
No, he wasn't. No.
So there's another connection.
Putin didn't become... Yeah, he didn't become until I think it was maybe 2000, maybe 99, 2000.
Yeah. So they pitched that idea with the Russians. The Russians wanted nothing to do with it. They left, went back to Russia. One of the things they pitched, another idea to get tension brewing and get fear in the heart of Americans again, was a generic or a general war against terrorists. And they were naming all these various countries. The president wasn't interested and didn't think it was a good idea. But one thing that I thought was oddly predictive is in 2001, 8 years after this movie was made, we would have a war on terrorism and a war against a lot of the countries that were thrown in on this after the September 11th attacks.
Because they were referencing in this movie as they were going through the
Kazakhstan,
the list of possible enemies that the United States could tangle with again, and then one of them suggests terrorists.
Mm-hmm. We were thinking, what could be a bigger threat than aliens invading from space?
Ooh, boy! Scare the shit out of everyone. Even me, sir.
Jesus, is this the best you could come up with? What about, international terrorism?
Well, sir, we're not going to reopen missile factories just to fight some creeps running around and exploding rental cars, are we, sir?
What's a blown up rental car going to do to fear, to put fear in the hearts of Americans, right? Because they're specifically referring to the first attempt on the World Trade Center, when the terrorists drove the vans filled with explosives into the parking garages of the World Trade Center, and they were trying to take the buildings down, which they weren't successful in. And so they were specifically referring to that, and they were just kind of brushing the terrorists off as this, like, no one's going to be afraid of them. You know, we need a better idea. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I did too. They went through a list of ideas. Nothing would work. The president was upset that his advisors weren't able to come up with a realistic target. And he said, like, well, you know, we've gone through everybody. There's no one. What are we going to do? Go to war with Canada? And that's what gets people thinking. Crazy enough to work is kind of the idea. It puts the seed in their heads that maybe we could start something with Canada. But what really kicks it off and cinches the deal for the president to begin his campaign of disinformation and propaganda against Canada is he sees a news report where there's a major hockey game on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls that, again, John Candy's character, Sheriff Boomer, he's in Canada attending a hockey game, and while he's there, they're noticing all these different things about Canada that while he's sitting in the crowd. But one of the things is he takes a drink of his beer and spits it out, and he says the beer is terrible here, which causes a massive brawl in the stands.
Yeah.
When the president sees this on TV and he realizes how violent Canadians can be in his mind and the national pride that both Americans and Canadians have, he decides, like, this is it. We can use this to our advantage to get people pissed.
These Canadians ain't got a care in the world.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing. The beer sucks.
So that's what kicks it off, and it takes them a really long time to get to this stuff. You know, this movie was an hour and a half long, and I thought, you know what, this could be a great half hour. You know, this idea is really, and what they put into this hour and a half could have been condensed to 30, 40 minutes and would have been pretty solid, I think.
Especially at the end. When it wraps itself up, I was kind of checked out from the plot.
I was totally checked out by the end. I was even considering not watching the end, but I'm like, no, I gotta watch.
You have to. We get to this point, they make the decision, we're going to start sowing seeds of disinformation related to Canada. And that's just what they do. The president and the media are in on this campaign to talk about how Canada is dangerous, Canada's unfair. It's this they're growing in size and becoming more and more powerful, and we have to do something about it. And it's not like bang on the stuff we're hearing on the news now, but just the idea of using like nationalist pride as kind of the fuel to this silly conflict. It just felt very 2025.
It did, yeah. You could replace, you know, their beer is awful with fentanyl, and it would be exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah. The American government, as a way to ramp up the tension, they come up with the idea of a false flag operation. They get a group of American soldiers and disguise them as Canadians. So they're wearing like fake Canadian military uniforms with Canadian flags everywhere. They attempt to blow up a hydro power plant, but they ended up getting busted and arrested again by Sheriff Boomer, John Candy's character.
Yeah, John Candy's character just happens to be guarding the hydro plant when this false flag operation is happening. And that was one thing I thought was kind of like really bad writing on behalf of Michael Moore, where it was like there was a lot of times where I was just like, okay, come on, like this is just lazy.
Well, John Candy's character, he takes on the role of like he's the sheriff in New York. He also worked at the weapons plant in the past and lost his job, so he's connected to these things. But he then goes to form this sort of like underground group to protect America. So it's almost like a militia sort of thing, which it's just like him and like his three friends or whatever. And they I guess they took it upon themselves to protect the hydro plant for some reason. puts them there.
Mhm.
But they also take it upon themselves to cross the border at night to go into Canada and cause some problems. What they decide to do is go across and litter all over the place, because so much of the jokes are based on Canada being like very kind and the crime being very low here. So they only have to go over to Canada and spread a bunch of garbage around some park, and they think that will be enough to, I guess, upset the Canadians and maybe get the Canadians to call off whatever fake news the Americans are believing the Canadians are up to.
Yeah, it was again, there were so many Canada jokes obviously in this movie that you were just kind of like, when you live in Canada, it's based off of God knows what.
There's
you know,
there's a lot of jokes about like a boot, the idea that Canadians say a boot. And
Yeah.
that one, that's a joke, and it very commonly told, but it's a misunderstanding. The people who say a boot, what you're talking about is French Canadians, like or what we would like a francophone, someone who's. I find if you hear someone whose French is their first language and they're speaking in English, they have a hard time with about or a boat. But that
Mhm.
exaggerated a boot is like a French speaking Canadian speaking English.
Yeah, the accents that the Mounties had in that scene where they get caught and the Mounties show up.
Yeah, they're littering in the park, and the Mounties show up and bust them. And they sounded English or like British to me.
You stupid jerk, what are you doing? It's my good stuff. Hello, who goes there? Freeze!
Johnny Canuck!
Now I must ask you to leave the park immediately and go back to where you came from.
Scatter! Everybody back to the boat!
Sir, you can't end your sentence with a preposition.
Oh, really? Well, what would you say?
Well, I guess I'd say either go back from where you came, or the preferred Queen's English, go back thee from whence thou came.
Yeah, they had some kind of a hybrid accent of British, French, stereotypical Canadian, and Irish, and it was all over the place, the both of these actors. I don't know what they were trying to do here. Obviously, they had some kind of bizarre Canadian accent in their mind, but it was just awful. I
Yeah.
was like, what are they doing?
Yeah, it missed the mark. But this, when the RCMP officers that you're discussing show up and bust John Candy and crew littering in the park, what ends up happening is John Candy and some of his buddies, they take off and jump in a boat and go back to over the river to the U.S. side, but they leave behind the sheriff's girlfriend, played by Rhea Perlman. She's left and she gets arrested by the RCMP and taken into custody. And that kind of kicks off the second act of the movie, which is this idea that the Canadians have a hostage. And for the John Candy's crew's militia, they want to get across and rescue his girlfriend. This storyline is kind of what sets up my favorite scene, which is at night, the sheriff and his crew go back into Canada. They accidentally shut off the power in the whole country by raiding a power plant, which has just this old couple working. But when they shut off the power to the whole country, they then go to the RCMP headquarters, which is like this log cabin in the woods, where they believe that John Candy's girlfriend, whose name in the movie was Honey, they believe Honey's going to be held at this RCMP office in the woods. And there's only one Mountie working, played by Stephen Wright, I think is the comedian's name.
That's him. Yeah, he seems to make cameos in pretty much every comedy movie in the late 80s, early 90s.
I love
You
him.
just see him all the time.
Welcome to Canada.
Hold it right there, Canuck.
Who are you?
I'm your worst nightmare. I'm a citizen with a constitutional right to bear arms.
Take the pelts. Take whatever you want.
We don't want your stinking pelts.
Have some fudge. Just leave me alone.
Just shut up. We want your prisoner. Now, where is she?
I don't know what you're talking about. Hey.
A boot. It's about what we're talking about. And enough of that A business. You're gonna learn how to talk right, understand?
We got ways of making you pronounce the letter O.
I want my honey.
See, this is all the prisoners we have. This man was arrested for putting regular gas into an unleaded tank.
Where do you think you're going?
Going over to show you the next guy.
All right, nice and easy. One step at a time, buddy.
This man was arrested for being in too many bad moods. This man raided a company, merged it with his conglomerate, and then fired all the employees. Get away from the bars, you scum!
Hold on, Jack!
Did you notice the sign out front though of that police station, like the Mountie station?
I didn't.
So the sign read Royal Mounted Canadian Police.
Oh, I wonder if because Royal Canadian Mounted Police may have a trademark or something, maybe they could.
That's what I was wondering too. I'm like, there has to be a very specific reason as to why it said Royal Mounted Canadian Police and not, the way it should be.
I wonder if it's because they would have the trademark or whatever associated with their image. Maybe it's just wasn't worth the trouble of getting it. But you think you'd be allowed to use something like that?
I guess, yeah, but it would make them RMCP and not RCMP.
When we were kids, we called it the raw carrots and mashed potatoes.
That's disrespectful.
Anyway, let's move on the story because we don't need to go through every plot element because a lot of the plot elements just served to set up some of these jokes and a lot of them weren't fantastic. But let's speed it up here. The tension builds just as the American president and his crew wants. The Americans are gone crazy. They're ready to fight this war. There's this fake news that's being perpetrated by the American government that the Canadians are across the border ready to invade the US. But the American government doesn't want it to get any more tense because what they want is kind of like a Cold War to keep everyone scared and distracted, to improve the economy and to get the feeling of wartime, but they don't actually want any fighting. So what they begin to do is worry about Sheriff Boomer, played by John Candy, and his militia being like, basically like, we need to stop these guys from going into Canada and causing trouble because it's only going to push this thing over the line. And that's kind of what begins to lead us into the film's third or final act, as we want to call it. John Candy's crew believes that since Honey, who they're trying to rescue, wasn't in this police station, they were told by the Mountie working at the police station that she's in the capital, Ottawa. And they don't believe it. They're like, Ottawa is not the capital. She has to be in Toronto, where the CN Tower is. And the CN Tower has a big part in this movie. It's discussed so often.
It is over and over again, but that is a real thing. A lot of people who live outside of Canada assume that Toronto is the capital.
Yeah.
Because that's the city you hear about all the time when you hear about Canada. It's like Toronto, the Toronto Raptors, the Toronto Blue Jays, whatever.
Drake, The Weeknd,
Degrassi, the whole thing. But I can understand why people think that Toronto is the capital of Canada.
Now you tell us where Honey is. Let me paint a picture for you, buddy. She's petite, extremely beautiful, and heavily armed.
Wait, you mean the litter bug? They took her to the capital to give her a free mental health examination.
Good. The capital, Toronto.
No. The capital of Canada is Ottawa.
Yeah, right. Do we look that stupid? Ottawa.
Nice try, Dudley.
All right, boys. We're going to Toronto. The capital.
I go to Toronto often. When I do, if I'm ever making like videos and stuff, I often say like, I'm here in our nation's capital, Toronto. So it's a joke I do as well, just like Michael Moore does.
Yeah. You guys should write together.
I don't know. I don't know if this is my style of humor that he has. I like a dad joke. I find this movie is like dad jokes straight through. I like them, but not this much. I'm more like, I prefer like kind of absurd and off the wall kind of humor. He doesn't really have that going on in this movie much. It's pretty much just pretty dry dad joke. Let's get to Dan Aykroyd's cameo, because this is another one of my favorite parts. Sheriff Boomer and his crew have left the police station. They're going to Toronto, where they believe Honey is locked up somewhere, and they want to rescue her. They steal a van and they spray paint all this anti-Canadian stuff down the side of it, basically like Canadians must die, Canadians are evil and this sort of thing. And they're using this to drive to Toronto. They end up getting pulled over by a Mountie played by Dan Aykroyd in an uncredited cameo. When Dan Aykroyd takes him out of the car and says, like, what's with these signs, they first blame it on, kids must have spray painted this. Dan Aykroyd's, the Mountie's not concerned about that. The issue with the signs is not what it says, but
everything has to be in both English and French.
Good day.
Hi.
May I see your license and registration, please?
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, Americans. Welcome to Ontario. Sportsman's paradise.
Isn't it, though?
Would you please get out and step away from the vehicle? Okay. What is wrong with this picture?
No snow tires.
No.
I was, driving on the wrong side of the road. I can explain that. You see, I'm not used to your rules up here, and I was...
That's not it. This writing on the side of your vehicle.
How did that get those kids at the garage? I just stopped for, like...
Whatever. My concern is the sensibilities of a certain distinct and viable part of Canadian society. Les Québécois.
Huh?
Wine drinkers, pea soup eaters, French Canadians.
Oh, yeah, those guys, sure.
If you wish to avoid prosecution, I would advise that you comply with our language laws, which specifically prescribe that all signs be in both English and French, Canada's two official languages.
Okay.
I do have to fine you. That'll be $1,000 Canadian, or 10 American dollars if you'd prefer.
Oh, no, I'll pay the American there, yeah. There you go, buddy. What do you want, 10? Thank you very much.
There's your receipt.
Thank you.
And now, in French, if you please.
They have to then spray paint French versions of the slogans on the side of the truck. So
that's something we take for granted, the whole like English and French on everything together. I see it so often, I'm used to it, but every so often, actually specifically when I was in the US not too long ago, to just see just English on a product is kind of like, oh wow.
It's one of the big complaints about companies who sell their, American companies who sell their products in Canada. It's expensive because of the packaging has to be done in English and in French. So it's kind of a hassle for them.
Yeah, and for people who are like collectors of stuff, a lot of people don't want the Canadian version. They'll pay extra for the American version because it's often cleaner packaging. Like if you collect like movies or something, if you look on the back of the box, let's say for a Blu-ray or whatever, on the Canadian one, the text has to be smaller because they need to fit like the summary of the movie in English, then underneath it the summary of the movie in French. Where if you had the American one, maybe there's more pictures or the text is bigger because it's just English. But I see the value of having a bilingual country, so I'm not complaining about that.
No, we're not complaining. It's not our problem.
Let's get through the end of the movie though, because things happen fast. They get to Toronto. They cannot find anyone. The cities are empty, as you described earlier in the beginning of our talk here. But they learn that the reason the city is empty is because everybody is at the CN Tower because there's some American girl with a gun up there. And they know it's their girl, Honey.
Yeah, she found her way there, which was another ridiculous, plot point in this movie, is that how she ended up getting there. And because she was in Ottawa, right?
Yeah, she was in Ottawa. Did it even explain why she was on top of the CN Tower with a gun?
Not that I can recall. I found this part very muddled in the narrative.
Oh, absolutely. Like the final 15, 20 minutes of the movie, it was like, whoa, like what is going on here? That's
so
what
she was in Ottawa and they were giving her some kind of a mental health check. And then
that's right.
She ended up taking one of the uniforms of the very nice and polite mental health professionals that were looking after her and got her hands on her gun again and then just took off.
Yeah, it's like Because when she was arrested, she had like a big machine gun. It was just like in a closet in the room where she was sent for a mental health
Yeah.
assessment.
But I can't remember
And
how she knew to get to the CN Tower, and that's where the nukes were
well,
being
they didn't
controlled
know.
from.
Yeah, and we didn't get into that because this came out of nowhere. Is all of a sudden when they were worried about the war ramping up and whatnot, the president and his advisors learned that this nuclear weapons system that was owned by the company that went out of business that we heard about at the beginning of the movie, for some reason the nuclear weapons were all activated and armed, and there was like a countdown for them to launch, and they were all aimed at Russia, which the Americans really didn't want those to go off because it would, kick off an actual war that they didn't want to happen. So they were trying to figure out like who armed these weapons, how do we stop it? And it turned out that the guy who owned the weapons plant that went out of business or that had to close down, he like kind of he had them like set up to activate as a way, I think, to get back at the president and the Americans.
There was some software that he had access to, some military software that allowed him to be able to access launching nuclear weapons.
Yeah, it was kind of vague
really, and it was really tacked on, and they were trying to add some tension to the end. So it seemed like that they were trying to shove this final plot point in to try and make the ending have more stakes involved to it.
Yeah.
It really just muddled everything down and made things a bit confusing, and it
moved really fast.
It was a real scramble. Yeah.
In the end, what ends up happening, I'll give away the very ending, is Honey, as she's up on the CN Tower with RCMP and stuff trying to get her, she ends up hearing like a speaker being like, 8 minutes to launch, 7 minutes to launch, this sort of thing. And she just kicks a door down and there's a bunch of computers and she shoots them and blows up the computers. As in a separate area back in the United States, the president and his advisors are watching the countdown for these nukes to launch. She shoots the computers, which turns out to be like the server room for this nuclear weapons system. She shoots it when there's like a fraction of a second before launch. So she saves the day.
She does, yeah. And just before that, John Candy's character Boomer is trying to get to her. So he reaches the CN Tower, and they show this clip of him running up the stairs of the CN Tower. And they clearly used a body double for that.
I noticed that as well.
It was the most obvious body double scene that I'd ever saw in a movie. Because you just have this clip of him going up the stairs, this like shot from really far away. And I'm like, that is not John Candy running up those stairs that fast.
Yeah. And that's basically the end of the movie. After that, they prevent the nukes from launching, and John Candy reunited with Honey. They get on a little boat and head back to the United States to probably live a peaceful life. Although we get one of those scenes where it's like, where are they now? Like where the text comes up or whatever, but there wasn't really anything notable there.
No, it was Michael Moore's last kick at the can for a couple of really bad jokes where each character, the president is now hosting a morning talk show host.
Yeah, because he didn't get reelected.
Because he didn't get reelected. And the jokes were really, really bad there and not worth repeating.
No, we'll save that. But overall, what are you going to give this movie out of 10? Be honest.
Okay, well, I'm going to start off by quoting Rotten Tomatoes. Have you looked at the Rotten Tomato reviews?
No, but I bet you they got smoked.
Okay, well, this got 17% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Do you think that's fair?
17% of the audience score was a little higher, I think, where 53% on the audience score. But
this is a little bit has gone on to become a cult classic sort of thing, but not to a large extent.
Maybe. I don't know if it did or not. I don't know if you call it a cult classic, but I'm sure people liked it more than, like, if I were to guess before looking at the Rotten Tomatoes ratings for this, I would have guessed that it was around 35. But so like right in between the actual Rotten Tomato score and the audience score, but 17 after I saw it before, I saw the 17% before I watched the movie, and I was like, oh man, like, is this movie that bad? And I was like, and after I watched it, I was like, yeah, it's that bad.
If I was giving it a score, I wouldn't give it a 17. I'd have given this movie like, I'd probably give it a 55, 60%.
Oh, that's
6 out of
generous.
10.
That's
But that's
generous.
because,
Really?
well, because I enjoy Canadiana type stuff. I enjoy the, the 80s, 90s era. So like for me personally, it hits some of those buttons. I love John Candy.
So do I.
Not the jokes, how they're delivered and told and constructed, but the topics that they're joking about, kind of like the Canadian stereotypes and stuff. I enjoyed that. So there's some aspects of the movie that I like. Yeah, 60 be generous. I would give it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm going to go up out of 10. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10 for this movie. Michael Moore ruined this movie completely. Like, not even just in the writing, but in the directing as well.
But he's not a director
the cast was
for this sort of film.
Well, he shouldn't have done this. He shouldn't have done this. He should not have done this movie.
People take a stab at it. Stephen King is a great author. He directed a movie and it flopped as well, although I thought it was fantastic. He did Maximum Overdrive. I think that's his only directorial credit. This is Michael Moore's only directorial credit for this style of movie. And making a comedy like this versus a documentary are two completely different things. And there's no question he's an amazing documentarian.
Absolutely. I love a lot of his documentaries, but this movie is just, it's even the pacing of it, like in the dialogue, like there's these weird pauses in some of the dialogue that I noticed that really killed any attempt at a joke. And you could tell it was the director that was like forcing that, because it kept happening over and over and over again from different actors. So you could tell that it was this style of delivery that the director was really getting the actors to do. But, I thought that, Alan Alda, who played the president, I thought he carried the movie. He was the best performance of the entire film.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I also enjoyed the guy who was like the head of the American government. I think the actor is Rip Torn. I thought he did really well. He just really wanted like to go to war. He kind of cracked me up a little bit. Who would be the main character? Is it John Candy or would it have been the American president? Who does the movie most closely follow?
It doesn't really have a main character. It really is an ensemble production. And because if I didn't know who any of these actors were, like John Candy is the most famous actor in this film, I would say. But if I saw this movie and didn't know who any of the actors were, I wouldn't say that there was a main character.
I think that's fair. Overall, I think the appeal of this movie at this point is its connection to the current American-Canadian conflict. It's one of the it closely matches in a lot of ways the mention of the 51st state, the God Bless America again, sounding a whole lot like Make America Great Again. The using media to push this narrative of nationalism, the military-industrial complex feeding the economy, like these are all kind of like current issues. So I think that's the appeal of this movie, not the humor. Like anyone who watches this now isn't watching it just for the humor, I hope.
No. And it had been so long since I saw this movie. I think I had rented it when it first came out back in the mid 90s, but couldn't remember much from it. I was really expecting a lot more from it. And that's not a pun, considering it was Michael Moore who did this movie.
I saw it when it came out as well, but I remember seeing it knowing it was a dud or that it had bombed. Because I think like we talked about earlier on, I think Wagons East came out first, and that was right after John Candy's death. That came out 5 months after his death, which is kind of amazing that they did that. John Candy died while filming it. They then had to rewrite the film, use CGI and body doubles to even get through that film. They re-released it, and it bombed like beyond belief. So when that came out, that was such a flop that when this came out after it, I think a lot of people were expecting it to suck, and it did horribly. I'm sure a part of the reason why it went through a bit of the developmental hell and was delayed release was because of how bad Wagons East went. And it's kind of a sad end to John Candy's career, to just, back-to-back duds.
Yeah, it is. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances for a great Canadian comedic actor who had a lot of great performances over his career and a lot of great credits. But
hell yeah. You know what also kind of mirrors Chris Farley. Chris Farley was not Canadian, but a huge American actor who he died, and the end of his career was like one or two like flops as well. And I think one of, John Candy's last film he filmed, that Wagons East, that was like a country western kind of movie. And I think Chris Farley's last movie was also like a western.
yeah, I do remember there was some Western movie that he did.
He did the
was it
Ninja
called,
one,
though?
which was called Beverly Hills Ninja. And
Yeah.
then his final movie was Almost Heroes. I think Matthew Perry's his co-star, who also passed away recently. But I remember, I was a huge Chris Farley fan, and I remember when Almost Heroes, which was his final movie, that Western, when that came out, it was like so awful. And I thought,
I never saw it. I did not see
Well,
it.
don't watch
Only...
it to honor his memory.
Let's review it right now.
No. I cherish his memory. Just like with John Candy, this isn't a good way for him to go out.
No. We should have did Uncle Buck.
But it's not a Canadian movie.
Yeah, who cares? Either is this one.
Yeah, good enough. Maybe Uncle Buck, but I think there's a lot of great Canadian movies to revisit. If Keep Canada Weird is going to focus on Canadian movies, let's raise it let's raise the bar for the next one. Do we do just bad movie reviews? We did the friggin' Tim Hortons musical. Now this.
Yeah, well, this is this seems to be what we're doing, but I don't think that's our specific idea is to do bad Canadian movies. We're just doing Canadian movies, and maybe Canadian movies aren't very good.
Isn't that a reputation? We do have a reputation for horrible TV and movies. So maybe
not all, let's say as two proud Canadians, not all of our movies and television shows are bad. We have some very, very good ones that are very well received and very popular around the world.
Some of the best. Brain Candy is amazing, but one of my favorite comedies of all time is The Wrong Guy.
Oh, The Wrong Guy, yeah, with Dave Foley.
A lot of people don't know that one. I don't know if I'll ever do that because it's so fringe. I don't even know where you can see it now.
I don't know. It'd be hard to find, but I'd love to watch it again. I saw it when it first came out and loved it. The Bare Naked Ladies make a cameo in that movie.
Yes, that's right. They do. If anyone hasn't seen that, watch The Wrong Guy instead of Canadian Bacon.
Yeah, watch The Wrong Guy and then listen to our Canadian Bacon review. That's the order.
Yeah, you hit all the boxes.
Yeah. We'll think about what the next movie will be. And if there are any suggestions from any listeners, you know damn well where you can go. It's nighttimepodcast.com/contact and give us a Canadian movie suggestion that you might want to listen to us review.
I want to thank you for helping Aaron and I fulfill our mission to keep Canada weird. If you've got a news story from your area that you'd like to share with us, or have any thoughts or theories or opinions on anything we discussed tonight, we'd love to hear from you. You can contact us by using the voice recorder that can be found at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. And on that topic, I want to give a big thank you to this episode's correspondents. If your voice message was aired tonight, you can email me your address. My email is nighttimepodcast@gmail.com, and I'll get a Keep Canada Weird badge and swag pack sent out to you. I just ask that you wear the badge proudly and responsibly. Next, a big thanks goes out to Aaron for another great night, Nicole for the intro and outro voiceovers, and Monty Data for the outro version of O Canada. And then, of course, a sincere and massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening. Your support makes this show possible. And if you'd like to support the show even more, please consider a subscription to the premium feed, which can be found at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. The premium feed costs just a couple dollars a month, but that money will fund the creation of new episodes of the show, and it'll give you those episodes 2 days early, ad-free, and access to a back catalog of episodes. And even if you don't want to go premium, You can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media. That helps a lot too, and it's free. Your support is very much appreciated. So with all that said, until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and together, let's keep Canada weird.
Keep Canada Weird is written, hosted, and produced by the Nighttime Podcast.